When it comes down to it, there was many things that me, you, and many others wanted to see from Jujutsu Kaisen before it came to a close. Akari vs Ryomen, Gojo's revival, the merger, a High Era flashback, and most importantly, the Nobara return. And we actually kind of got that return, but I wanted to take a closer look at that section of the manga and that storyline, and perhaps provide an alternative and provide some reasons as to why I think Gege kind of fumbled that return in and of itself. But to do all of that first, we've got to set the stage. So let's talk about it.
Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
Pretty much right out the gate, Nobara was present with Yuji and Megumi, and she was loud, abrasive, and most importantly, lovable. Looking at you, Sakura. For legal reasons, that's a joke. Please do not kill me, I promise it was just a joke. But her dynamic within the team with Yuji and Megumi acted less as a friend or comrade and more like a sibling, almost. At any given point, her and Yuji and Megumi would be bickering or acting the fool, but when it really came down to it, Yuji and Nobara knew how to lock it in and essentially get the job done. All three had glimpses of potential shining through in their respective power sets, but by the time we get to Shibuya, Megumi has been shown to be someone who's wielding a curse technique that could rival Gojo's Limitless, and in fact at one point in the past, it did. And Yuji, well, you already know about Yuji. And then there's Nobara. You see, by the time Nobara starts to really shine in Shibuya, it's too late. Now, I've talked about this topic across streams and videos before, but one thing that I've always loved about Jujutsu Kaisen is how its brutality shines through and how Gege handles death in the series as a whole. It's brutal, it's abrupt, and it takes things from you that you didn't even know that you had. Death robs you of your potential, your future, and everything that might have been, and Shibuya, Nanami, and Nobara's deaths are the direct results of Gege's brutal storytelling. How Gege handles death in Jujutsu Kaisen isn't really the same as other authors. At no point in Jujutsu Kaisen do you get to see the characters who have lost someone bury them or mourn them or sit back and really process their emotions in a way that me, you, or anyone else who's a normal, well-adjusted person would do that. Toji, Haibara, Geto, Riko, Yuki, Yuji's grandpa, Nanami, all of these characters all have their deaths, and after that fact, they're barely looked at ever again. And for some of us, this is very off-putting, and it feels like a kick in the teeth. You know what else feels like a kick in the teeth? Not being able to get a good night's sleep. Speaking of which, this video is sponsored by Manta Mask. Manta Mask is a sleeping mask company that I've been partnered with for a long time now, and let me tell you, I'm coming up to being a father. Sleep it's going to be super duper important, and we've had a lot of restless nights already, but shout out to Manta Mask that have genuinely helped me with my sleeping needs. They've got a lot of masks on their website available. They do a kid's sleeping mask, a cooling sleeping mask, a steam sleeping mask. They do a whole variety. They even do silk and a sound sleeping mask. If not only do you need pitch black, you also need sound to dampen out any outside noises. Manta Mask is a phenomenal company that I've had the pleasure to be partnered with, and I would consider them friends of the channel by now. So if you haven't already, cop yourself a Manta Mask. Use the link in my description to get yourself 10% off your order. And once again, thank you so much to Manta Mask for sponsoring this video. That's a completely rational and well-adjusted response. If you feel like that, after all, how could you move on so fucking quickly from a character that has had such an impact on you, yourself, and the story? But Gege does this for a reason, because Jujutsu society and the way it handles death is so alien and so far removed from us and normality. To see it play out in front of us is to go against everything that we are as a human. It's weird, it's strange. Death is almost expected in the job and the roles that they play, and I think that's the point. I think with Nobara, it was different. At the end of Shibuya, they showcased her in her best light yet. After hitting a black flash, she was finally starting to understand the true essences of her cursed energy, a cursed technique. A cursed technique which, at that point in time, was a direct counter to Mahito. Everything seems to be going a little bit too well, right? No, not at all. Nobara's supposed death hit everyone hard. So hard, in fact, that a good chunk of the fan base went absolutely rabid when this happened in the manga, and then again once it happened again in the anime. And the problem lies in two things. One, the ambiguity of Nobara's quote-unquote death. Two, her cursed technique. One is a problem for obvious reasons. Neither confirming nor denying a character's death can be used to create tension and confusion and anticipation of that character's possible and eventual return, and Gege is no stranger to doing something like this. The best example that we know of is the Enchained by the Vow, a moment in the manga that took everyone by complete and utter surprise, but it came from over 200 chapters of setup. However, Nobara's return didn't quite hit that same note, didn't quite hit the same way, for me and for many others, and I believe it was Gege's timing. Now, I'm not a writer, nor am I going to ever claim to have done it better. However, I am going to provide a way that Gege could have done this and achieved the same result and still kept true to his own writing. When Nobara returned, while it was hype at the time, in retrospective, it felt entirely rushed and all too convenient to everything that was happening in and out of that moment. You see, the Enchained by the Vow was set up since before Shibuya even happened, and the difference here between Nobara returning and the Enchained by the Vow was we knew Sukuna was planning something. We knew he had an interest in Megumi, but as for what that plan was and how it would come about, entirely a mystery, and Gege added to that mystery every now and then by dropping in more and more breadcrumbs until eventually we get to chapters 212 and 213, the penultimate conclusion of that story beat. So when it finally played out, especially at a pivotal moment for Megumi and everyone, it took us all by surprise. But with Nobara, she was cast off screen and mentioned barely never until her return, which I think therein lies the problem. Not once did Gege ever hint at Nobara's return, but she was constantly at the forefront of the audience's minds, and I think that's where the fumble happened. Having her return only moments after she'd woken up from a coma was certainly a bold choice, but if I was to change anything, and if I had have had my say on the story, I'd have had Gege add in just a singular panel of Nobara's eyes opening or twitching. Now you might be saying, "Weeb, this is cliche, but bear with me. Where would I add this?" I would add this right as Gojo was unsealed. You see, that moment right there was overwhelming. It was the first big victory for the gang that we'd had pretty much since before Shibuya. Like, we were just taking L's after L's after L's. So Gojo's moment, his unsealing, it was a triumphant chapter for the heroes, for us. So adding an ambiguous panel of Nobara's eyes twitching or opening just slightly right after Gojo's unsealing caused that small earthquake, and then never going back to it, just leaving that little breadcrumb and just leaving it to fester in our brains. Then by the time it finally came to Gojo and Sukuna starting their fight, our minds would have been so focused on what was happening, while also dealing with Gojo's death and the fallout of Gojo vs Sukuna, that most of us would have forgotten that that panel even happened, but Gege kept it there as a little breadcrumb for us to keep. Sort of like what he did with the Miwa throwaway panel right in the middle of the Sendai Colony games just after Yuta's fights. Miwa appears randomly and it looked ominous. We just got that random panel of Miwa and nothing was ever seen again. Now this brings me to the point of Nobara's curse technique. You see, Nobara, just before she was taken out by Mahito, was starting to truly understand her curse technique, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, and by extension she was going to become a real threat to Mahito. But as anyone paying attention to the story also guessed, she became a threat to Sukuna at the same time as her development towards Mahito. So to have her return at the 11th hour and land a critical strike on Sukuna, it felt haphazard, it felt particularly cheap. The part where she'd only been awake for less than an hour particularly. If Gege had shown her waking up way earlier, as I mentioned, I think it would have been a lot more plausible for us to get on board with the idea of her appearing all of a sudden and then landing a crucial blow against Sukuna. But again, another problem arises with her blow on Sukuna, and it's that it feels as if Yuji never really got his moment to shine. When it came down to it, it was just finally Yuji and Sukuna there, standing after Yuji's domain, their chat, their talk. It felt like we were finally going to get to see that big Yuji moment, and then Nobara's return sort of hampered that in a way. Again, all of this was done in a favour of returning and giving us a callback to Yuji's return when he was quote-unquote dead, a callback to Nobara and Yuji's Black Flash from way back when, and all of it kind of just leaves a bit of a sour taste in the mouth once it's done and dusted. But for me personally, did it ultimately ruin the series? No. By this point in time, in the manga, I kind of knew what type of story Gege was telling. He was a hype beast, and he was a damn good hype beast at that. He was good at creating every week a story and a chapter that left us feeling for more and coming back every single week, and that's what he was good at. That's what he was known for, and that was his legacy. As I've said plenty of times, is the story perfect? No, absolutely not. There's definitely things that he could have done better, but for someone who burst onto the manga scene and has written his first breakout manga, essentially, only having like one shot that was published before this, to get to this point, to blow up so massively, to blow up so humongous. It's exciting to see where he'll go and where he'll develop and what he'll take from this manga and move into the next one. Anyways, that's everything from me. If you haven't already, consider liking and subscribing. And also, if you're filthy rich, consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, let me know what you think of the video in the comments down below. And as always, I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love. Big fucking kisses. Peace.